Welcome to News Center. I'm Parikshit Luthra. China has imposed restrictions on 7 medium and heavy rare earth mineral exports in the midst of Trump's tariff war, which has led to a protracted standoff between the world's two superpowers, US and China. As per a New York Times report, shipments of rare earth magnets, a critical component used in manufacturing electric cars, missiles, even drones and robots, have been halted at many Chinese ports. NYT has reported that the Chinese government is drafting a new regulatory system which, when in place, could permanently prevent supplies from reaching certain companies, including American military contractors. China accounts for over 70% of production of rare earth minerals across the world. 75% of rare earth minerals imported into the United States between 2019 and 2022 came from China. India's EV sector is definitely in a spot of bother. Sources say that the industry is facing production challenges, adding that Beijing is now demanding end-user certificates signed by both the Indian Foreign Ministry and the Chinese Embassy before authorizing any such order. In fact, Rajiv Bajaj has warned that the industry could be headed towards a grinding halt if the curbs are not removed.
As of yesterday, I still have to verify this, but I was given to believe that suddenly China has decided not to permit the export of heavy rare earth magnets, which are used in motors of electric vehicles. And as you know, that for some of these EV components, the whole supply chain of the world resides in China.
Exactly.
So if this is true, we are still trying to come to terms with the facts, all the facts. But if this is true, it would mean that, and if it doesn't change, then in a matter of weeks, the entire Indian EV industry will grind to a halt.
And joining me now is Ashok Chandak, President of the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association, Rakesh Sharma, Executive Director of Bajaj Auto. We also have with us Jonathan Cheng, China Bureau Chief at the Wall Street Journal. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Sharma, if I can begin with you, give us a sense of what is the immediate impact these restrictions that were imposed by China on the export of rare earth materials. I believe this started on the 4th of April, but are you already seeing impact on the production line?
Hi, Parikshit. Yes, the Chinese government announced a slew of strict controls pertaining to the export of rare earth magnets, which find application in motors in the EV side. And we are completely dependent on those. The controls came into immediate effect on 4th April, so much so that product which was in the ports for shipment was also held back. So obviously there is a disruption in the supply chain, and the process for end-use certification still needs proper buttoning down and a definition as to who all will have to validate it, from where it will go, and what will be acceptable. And it finally ends up back in China, where a certain committee will give a decision on this. So the process itself is a little bit ambiguous, and that is what we are trying to come to terms with. And in the meantime, right, I would say that during this quarter, different product lines will get impacted by the supply chain, because as the stocks run out in the system and fresh stock and it's not replenished, we will see during the quarter severe impacts on almost all product lines.
Right. So you're expecting severe impact on all EV production lines, Mr. Sharma. That's an important point. I would like to ask you, so what the ask here from the Chinese government is, you have a performer that you have to fill in a required format that needs to be endorsed not just by the Ministry of External Affairs in India, but also the Chinese Embassy. You also have to give a declaration that this will not be given to any third party or will not be used for making weapons. Do you feel that this is a very complicated process and almost amounts to saying that you will not get this at all?
No, I wouldn't say that this is not possible at all, because at least from our point of view, it's the end use is confirmed, and it is common knowledge, and we should be able to certify end use. It is the steps in the process. See, there is a very broad-based circular of guidance issued by the by PRC. But that has to be then broken down into steps. Which is the certifying agency, and which is the endorsing, validating agency, and what will happen at the terminal, at the end of the whole process? How much time is it going to take? Are we supposed to do it transaction-wise, or is it supposed to be quantum-based, period-based? All these things have to be still sorted out.
Right. Very important points there. Sir, stay with us. Let me also get in Jonathan Cheng of the Wall Street Journal. Jonathan, this is not just for the auto sector. This is for all electronic manufacturers. This impacts the space sector, the semiconductor sector, and it applies to all nations for that matter. This is clearly linked to the US-China trade war. At what point do you think the Chinese government will start thinking of a reprieve or for pulling away this non-tariff barrier?
I think it's very hard to predict when that might happen. I think China recognizes here that it does have some leverage because all of those industries that you just mentioned, or many of them, are reliant on these rare earths. Of course, rare earths aren't actually all that rare. They're plentiful around the world, but there aren't many countries that can process it, and that's where China really has a chokehold on the global industry. And because all of these industries are linked to national security, there is a national security grounds that they can claim on this. And of course, we've seen that trade more generally has become a national security issue. Certainly, that's the way the US has been looking at it for the last few years in terms of restricting semiconductors and restricting other things that they see as critical to China's advancement. And China obviously sees it that way as well. So even if they're being used for things that don't have anything to do with the military, it is going to gum up the whole system and introduce a lot more uncertainty.
Right. Let me get in Ashok Chandak of the Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Mr. Chandak, how worried is the Indian electronics manufacturing industry, the semiconductor manufacturing industry, as a result of these curbs that have been announced by China? Are your members writing to you to seek help from the government? Have you already approached the government for help?
I would call from electronics semiconductor perspective, the impact is still a bit far off, I would call. Because particularly for example, as Mr. Sharma highlighted, the magnets and other things required for electric vehicles, these are many times hand to mouth and in supply chain. But while for semiconductor industry, there is a very limited quantity of these materials required, but these are very important surely. There is always some supply chain running in terms of the warehousing, stocks, and other stuff. So immediate in a couple of months, we don't see any major issue that is going to come up actually. However, this issue will need to be sorted out, this need to be addressed. And my view is, obviously China is taking steps, we don't know how to dwell why they do this, but I would say that a single country cannot stop the whole world actually. So there would be ways by which some, like the end use certificate is an example which has been put up over here, that would be there in force for some time. Which will create running of the existing production requirement of electronic semiconductor industry, not only India, which is at an answer stage for semiconductor right now, but also globally. But there are new alternatives, those are going to emerge actually. In fact, last couple of quarters or years, I have seen already in the semiconductor industry, many companies are trying to diversify their supply chains and supply bases. And we also know that for this rare earth element, it is not the question of where the rare earth elements are available. There are several countries, those have got the mining possibility, be it Australia, even Africa, Sweden, even in India, for example. The issue is of the refining and the processing. And there also refining processing, there are two factors we should look at. One is the economical factor, and second is the technology factor in terms of the refining processing. And I would say that the amount of the total amount of the market size for these materials has limited the number of companies doing the refining and processing of these materials. And China definitely has got the leadership in terms of the market share, surely over there, with whatever means and other stuff. But this should happen going forward, as we see already several companies worldwide started talking about diversifying supply chain, looking at even the recycling as one of the method, because some of the materials required for magnets and other semiconductor lithography machines and equipments, they would need they could also use the recycling topic actually. So
Right.
I would say in short term, yes, definitely there is a cause of concern. I want to bring one example here, if you allow me 30 seconds more. When Russia-Ukraine war started, everybody was worried that the entire industry will come to the grinding halt because most of the precious gases like neon and other stuff were supplied from Ukraine. And you would see that, except few noise here and there, nothing much stopped in terms of the industry per se, actually. So I would say that we should stay tuned. The industry is working and people are working towards finding out the alternative ways and means. Even India has an opportunity, I would call, under Department of Science and Technology, there is a material processing department, and we could also look at expediting those refining and processing capabilities over there, actually.
Right. Let me get in Mr. Sharma once again. Mr. Sharma, any domestic supplier that you can source these earth magnets from, rare earth magnets from? What about going to other nations, such as Australia for that matter, to get these rare earth magnets? Is there a market, a supplier base anywhere else where you can get them?
Well, certainly not domestically. And these rare earths, as one of the panelists pointed out, China is currently a 90% market share, primarily because of the solvent extraction and the chemical processing capabilities, which take time to put in place, whilst rare earths minerals are available in many places. So in the short term, or even in the medium term, let's say, over a year or 18 months, it is difficult to substitute China as a source for rare earth magnets for application, at least in our industry, which is the EV sector.
Do you feel this is going to result in a price rise for electric vehicles specifically in the coming months?
No, I don't think it is price related. I think it is disruption related. So at least the responsible OEMs will not leverage this to increase prices. There may be some secondary market which develops, but we should not lose sight of the fact that India is a very large market for EVs, at least for two-wheelers outside of China. Currently, and let's say in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be a huge market. So it's a huge business opportunity for anybody, obviously including China, to supply the Indian EV system. So I think in the short term, it's very, very important to understand what the objectives of the Chinese government are, to take them at face value and not consider this as a non-tariff barrier, and quickly align to the process requirements. If that can be clarified on both sides, on the India side and the China side, then I think we will be able to deal with this short-term disruption.
Right. Jonathan, this was one leverage. Hopefully, it will not become like the semiconductor moment that we saw during COVID-19, where there was a crisis with regard to semiconductors all around the world. But do you feel that there are other critical materials where China could probably turn off the tap in order to have more leverage in the trade negotiations with the US?
Well, I do think that this is one of the more powerful ones, just because it's not something that is so clearly understood by other people. I think it's something that plugs into all of the things that are the most sensitive, and therefore something that it can inflict great pain. But also it's not so easy to understand for the average person. So there may be less blame that goes towards China in that regard. But I do think that, China has had a lot of time to think about this, because during Trump's first term, most of his focus was on China, and China did have to look for different ways to exert leverage. I think exactly what the other panelists have said here. I think you're going to start to see other countries look for alternatives. In the past, you never really had to think about this, because you knew that you could get what you needed from China at a very good price. But if China is going to start to withhold it, then you need to look for alternatives. And I think when that starts to happen, then China loses some of that leverage. And I think you'll start to see that happen over the medium term. It won't change overnight. And that's what gives China its leverage now. And arguably, that's the reason why they should use their leverage now, if that's how they see it, because they may not have it going forward.
Right. Mr. Chandak, final question to you. Do you believe that, at a time when the world was trying to diversify away from China, this move may actually force companies to continue investing more? And if tomorrow they need these materials and they're not getting it at the price they want or so easily, do you feel that more companies may want to get into China and that diversification towards India may slow down?
No, my view is this is one of the classic examples during the all so-called trade wars, that the countries are going to leverage what they have, and that's what we see from a China perspective. But I can tell you that particularly from a semiconductor industry perspective, the companies have already started several quarters and years to look at the alternative mechanisms. So, for example, some of the examples which are known to me particularly, US already started processing of the gallium and germanium. In Japan, there is some activity going on. The company in Australia called Lenas, they already started to work on this neodymium and praseodymium oxides. And this is going on actually. So my view is, in the short term, definitely there is a major cause of concern, no doubt about it. It could also create the shortages and delays and some disruptions, including a price rise for these materials actually. But in a medium to long term, the multiple opportunities would emerge, and there would be more suppliers, those would emerge for multiple materials. And growing, it is increasingly seen now that for semiconductors as well as electronics, both, those are critical for every country. The several companies are coming forward now and try to invest and try to bring. And as I mentioned before, because the total market size in terms of the $1 million or $1 billion, if you want to count, was quite limited. And that is why many companies did not diversify. And China continued to do the economically viable way of processing and selling at affordable prices, actually. That went on. But finally, if it comes to this kind of a situation, it will become a problem. And I want to put again one more statement here, just 30 seconds more. I mean, I know everybody's talking about China taking steps and other thing, but I would say one country would be affording to choke the entire world for a longer time. They would negotiate, they will provide something. Finally, everybody has to survive in the world actually. So they are not going to stop.
That's right.
I don't think that everything will come to a stop everywhere, every country in the world. Somewhere the solution would emerge.
That is hope, sir. That is hope. That is the hope, sir, that the US-China trade war is unsustainable. These tariffs are unsustainable, and somewhere they will come to a truce very soon, and that will be good for everyone, of course. But thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, Jonathan Cheng, Ashok Chandak, for joining us on this very interesting discussion. We're taking a short break. On the other side, we take stock of China's continued commitment to its economic growth amid escalating tariff tensions with US and what it means for the global trade order. With former US ambassador to the ADB, Curtis Chin. When we return, stay tuned.